Immaterial.
Hello, lovelies. I am Denise McNeil, and I have another Magical Egypt live for you today. I'm very excited to have with me a young man by the name of Logan Hart, who is the creator of the Wizard Factory, which is a spiritual philosophy platform where he talks about all kinds of things that enable people to free their minds and step into their own power and freedom, which is like, what a concept, freedom these days. Hello, Logan, and welcome to Magical Egypt.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, darling. I'm so excited to talk to you. I have been a student of natural law, really, for a very long time, since Mark Passio brought it to attention. And I don't think I've watched all of his videos. I don't know if anybody can, but in the early days, I really did a great effort to get through as many of them as I can. And since then, I've tried to share it with people. But one of the things that I think is a little bit challenging for people is that Mark's approach is so intense, right? He's a very intense guy. And so, since you're more easygoing and flowing and karaokeing, I think that it'll be really, really cool for my audience to have another perspective, one that's a little bit, younger and cooler. So give us an idea, fundamentally, what is natural law?
Absolutely. I have been a student, I guess you could say, of Mark's work since pretty early on, maybe around 2011 or so. And it's been extremely impactful and just paradigm expanding, and it's an ongoing process. So there's always new layers to be uncovered there, and it's all about, to me, holistic frameworks. And I think that'll be a good theme that we'll kind of keep touching on as we move through these different things. You'll see that this is very central to my approach to everything. So natural law specifically, just to keep it as simple and basic and straightforward as possible, you have the word natural, and even that, there's so many different ideas of what that can mean, different interpretations. So to understand what I mean, when I use that word in this context, it just basically means non-man-made. It's inherent to nature itself, or reality. That's another thing too, is that nature is non-man-made, just as reality. So I kind of use those two words, reality and nature, interchangeably. It doesn't just mean trees and birds and animals and nice things like that, like, oh, let's go for a hike, that kind of nature. It's those things too, because there's a lot more at play that is less under the influence of man in that world, but the laws of nature apply just as much in the depths of a big city as anywhere else, because that's the point of natural law, is understanding that they are universal. So they are applied. Universal means applicable in all cases, in all places, right? It is not bound by location or what year it is. They're always in effect. They are the governing dynamics of reality via cause and effect. So there are unconscious causes, just random events that are bumping into each other in this just chaotic soup of reality. And then there's the conscious being that's making choices that are calculated and can be understood by an intelligent being, that if I do this, this is likely to be the outcome, for better or worse. And that's what intelligence and consciousness really is having a higher level of understanding of the consequential effects of our actions. So to be a conscious being is about feeling the weight, the moral gravity of a choice before you make that. You understand the implications that this is going to have an effect on not just the world around me, but me as well, because I'm not insulated, right? I live in this reality. So if I make a choice, It's not just happening directly to whatever I'm directing it at. There's always that kind of blowback effect.
That's so interesting. Look, I'll tell you, one of the people that seem to be like a big hero right now is Elon Musk, right? Because he's got the freedom of speech platform, right? But I'm looking at all of these articles where his little satellites are potentially doing so much harm that it could be the end of all of humanity, right? And so it's one of those things that it's a decision that he's made without consciousness of the repercussions, because something like this has never been done before, right? And so it seems like from the very top to the very bottom, people are going through this world not doing what you're doing, which is kind of considering the consequences of their actions. And there were three words that kind of really bring it home for me. The first one is nature. When you talk about living in the big cities, yes, the natural laws do apply, right? But people have been so disconnected from nature. Like, it's like something that's happened to humanity where unless you go camping, away from the lights and the phone and all of this, the idea of what nature actually is so alien. The next word that you said is intelligence, and I am not seeing a whole lot of that in our humanity right now. Like, it's like intelligence seems to have kind of slipped out the back door. And the third one is reality, because reality
Is offensive.
is such a subjective thing. So talk to me about the reality aspect. Like, when we're all in our own reality bubbles, how do you even apply a law when we don't even know what reality is?
Man, there's so much to get into there. You just, touched on many just really important points there. First of all, being intentional with words is so vital to having a good operating system in your mind. So if we're using or misusing or abusing terminology, it's going to create unnecessary confusion, because words are like a tool. It could be, a clunky hammer or a scalpel. It to be exactly what your intention is, because the word isn't the thing. Your thought is the thing. The words are just the vehicle that you're trying to use to carry that intention or that thought, that concept, to another mind in a way that can be understood. So the more precise and intentional that you can be with that, be impeccable with your words. That is just so important. So when we're talking about this word reality, well, the word real is right there in the word. So I get that people have these different ideas of like my reality and your reality, but I think that is really not optimal in terms of the semantics, because it's just creating unnecessary ambiguity around these ideas, because what is real is objective truth, right? Something can feel real, but that doesn't make it real. It might be real to you, but that is your perception. That's not your reality. So this is where, people can use whatever words they like. For me, I am very adamant about not conflating reality or truth with things like perception, beliefs, feelings. Exactly. Because those things are subjective and they are valid to you, right? I can't tell you what you do or don't feel, but those things don't actually have direct bearing on what is true or not, right? Say someone you care about has passed away. That might be excruciatingly painful emotionally to you, but you can't just decide, well, my reality is that they're still alive. The only sane thing to do is accept what is. As painful as it is, the truth is nothing can be, like, even though truth can be painful, living in illusion and lying to yourself is far more painful and destructive to yourself and everyone in your circle of influence, essentially. So that's why that's a big message of mine, is just there is no my reality, there is no my truth or your truth. There's my perceptions, my viewpoints, my beliefs, my thoughts, my feelings, those subjective aspects. But there is only one reality, only one truth, and one nature. Again, those words are interchangeable, truth and nature, because that is the whole fundamental point of existence, is that we are sharing this world together. There's one earth. We all have to figure out how to live together on this planet in the same reality, even if we don't necessarily have to like each other or agree about everything, and that's okay. We're going to have different opinions but not different truths. When you start getting into different truths, it's a very slippery slope, because having truth be wishy-washy is a direct line to moral relativism, where morality is wishy-washy, and then people really start suffering badly, and you have genocide and all kinds of other terrible things. That's why you have to have that foundation of truth as just the supreme thing.
And look, going back to your comment on words, right? I think that in my podcast, in my very first podcast, I say to people, I'm going to be using words that you think you know the meaning of, that you understand, right? Like when I say moral or truth, right? Everybody thinks that they have an understanding of that fundamentally. But I think the problem is that we really don't. We really don't understand what truth with a capital T is, beauty with a capital B, right? I think the words have been so diluted, and it's really interesting. I'm like on this Ingo Swann tear right now, and he's got a book called Powerology. The Secrets of Power. And in this book, he talks specifically about language and how language has been depowered by taking definitional meanings away from words. Like, we're going to talk about the esoterics later, but one of the biggest esoteric concepts is the concept of will with a capital W. And it had something like 272 definitions 100 years ago. And now it's like, I want, right? Okay. So words have been literally squished into basic lack of meaning. And so I'm sure that in the work that you're doing at the Wizard Factory is kind of re-education in some respect, right? And one of the things that I see that you do, which I think is one of the most important things that needs to be done for humanity, is the reintroduction of the Trivium. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how that applies to truth?
Absolutely. Before I get into that, I want to address a couple things that you said there as well, because so that I'm not confusing people or maybe just turning them off immediately based on what I've said so far, because there's something in their mind.
You're amazing.
Well, I know how people think. I know there are a lot of different ideas. I pay attention to the psychic weather, as Thomas Sheridan likes to call it. And so, like, I want to address those things head on instead of just leaving people to just kind of make their own knee-jerk reaction and assumptions and things like that. So in the Kabbalion, which is kind of the elementary school to understanding natural law, it spells out the 7 kind of fundamental ones. I think there's a lot more to it than that, but it's a great starting point. So it's not the end-all be-all, but it is a really good foundational piece. And in that, there's concepts like polarity, right? I think objective and subjective is a polarity that needs to be understood. So a common dialectic that I see playing out a lot is people in one camp or another saying truth or morality is objective. It just is that. And then the other side is just like, no, it's subjective. And it's actually both. So, people are kind of both right and wrong on both sides, and they're not seeing the bigger picture, that there is, so truth itself is objective, but our interpretation of truth and reality is subjective. And because we are subjective beings, we can never be 100% objective, because we're not God or like some perfect machine or something like that. You have to account for that. There's the nuance in that. So understanding truth as a concept isn't about being perfect. It's not about being all-knowing, like, oh, you think you have some truth. What, you think you just have. No, that's the mind control playing out, is that you can understand truth is just what it is. You can acknowledge that that's the definition of truth without implying that you have all the truth, or you have this like godlike all-knowing understanding of truth, right? So that's the nuance, that's the balance. And language is the same way as well. There's an objective meaning to words. Break them apart into their components of etymology, their Latin and Greek and Germanic backgrounds, for English, for example. That those things don't change because they're the building blocks of the word itself. At the same time, interpretations and connotations of a word can shift and change throughout time. So once again, it's not one or the other, it's both. And that's something, just that concept alone is something that I see people really struggle with in every community, every camp of the philosophical, the freedom community, the whatever esoteric community. People just really have a hard time with balanced, nuanced thinking that can take the two extremes and synthesize them into a gray kind of practical
or functional,
yeah
or functional
practical
thing. Because like I'm sitting here hearing you, and I'm like, oh my god, like I obviously have my own feelings and beliefs, but I try to get to the capital T truth. But now I have to like it seems like a very, very tricky path to navigate, darling. You know what I mean? It just,
of course.
particularly in like I call it a post-truth world, right? I really do call this world that we're currently living in post-truth, right? So like to negotiate that journey, wow, how do you do it?
But this is why people don't like that feeling. They'd rather be told this is what truth is. Don't worry. It's either the infallible word of God, so you don't have to have any doubt. You can just trust it blindly 100%. Or some guy in a white lab coat said it and he peer-reviewed it, so it's legit, and there's your source of truth. Don't worry. It's all figured out.
Or trust your feelings, because that's direct, right? Like that
True.
might be like the biggest problem we have, because when I feel it, it's direct, it's there, and I can say this. It's like I don't need to think, I don't need to analyze, I don't need to listen to a Bible or a guy in a white coat. It's just here, and that's probably why we're in this mess, because this is so close to the surface that it's the easiest thing to trust, which is also probably the most incorrect in general for most people.
Yeah, it's a useful tool, but it's not a reliable sole way of determining truth. It's one part. And so this is a perfect segue into the trivium that you just asked me about, because the trivium is the truth discernment and discovery process that is built into the human psychology, as well as just the nature of consciousness, and being a being that lives in reality, that's navigating, that's trying to discern what's real, what's not, and then how do I base my decisions on that. That's really what spirituality is. Being a spiritual being is exercising your consciousness, your holistic intelligence, to make sense of the world, and therefore how to navigate it through your choices, which you're responsible for, both the negative and the positive outcomes of that. And then all of that is a feedback loop through those choices and then the outcomes to tell you, okay, this was a good choice, this one not so much, maybe we won't do that again, or we'll just tweak it and try it this way. And it's this ongoing process. So that's kind of just in a nutshell what the Trivium is. It's it's like a pyramid that has layers. That is, there's a few different ways you can look at it that are all relative and actually beautiful because they sort of just interconnect with each other. It's hard to explain, but it's like they parallel.
It's a framework,
the layers.
to use your
Right,
word.
right. So some call it logic, rhetoric, and grammar. But I think the most just direct and easily understood way is thoughts, emotions, and actions, because that's the internal kind of human version of that. Is and there's a hierarchical structure to it. Okay, so your thoughts dictate your feelings, because it's like, think about it. If it's based on underlying beliefs. So say you're stuck in traffic and at first you feel frustrated because in your head you're having thoughts that are telling you, oh, this is wasting my time, I have important things to do, this is just my luck, I hate this city, etc., and on and on. The mind is so good at coming up with those stories, right? But then if all you have to do is make the conscious choice to change your story, and you can change your feelings about it. So instead of being the victim and like, oh, this always happens, be like, wow, I've been waiting for a great time to catch up on this podcast, or call my mom. And then you make use of that time, and then you can turn that situation that wasn't really bad or good, you just changed your framework. And then the emotion of gratitude or joy shifted based on the mindset. So first principle of the Kybalion or natural law is mentalism, and those are hierarchical as well. It's the first one for a reason, because everything starts in the mind first. So then you have the emotions that follow, and then that is going to play into what you care about, because if you know something but you don't care enough to take action, then you won't take action on it, right? And how many people are living like that? They know the right thing, they just don't care, because care, that's not cool. What, you care, you have feelings, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? It's so much cooler to just be like, whatever, doesn't affect me, YOLO.
Yeah.
That kind of attitude.
Fucks to give.
Right, zero fucks. Exactly. Yeah. That is exactly they're bragging that they have the sacred feminine of care has been put to death in their consciousness, and that's not a good thing. So you have to know enough to care enough to do, and that's where the actions come out. But you have to have the will, which is born of the care, but you also have to have the courage too, because someone could care, but if they don't have the courage, they still will act out of fear and not take that action, because as they say, courage is not the lack of fear, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyways, because it's the right thing to do. Your mind, your thoughts are in alignment. So the magic ultimately comes down to aligning all of those in unison, because most people, especially that are not self-aware, they're not doing any kind of spiritual work to better themselves, they're just totally running on instinct and programming, mind control. They're in all kinds of discord between what they think, what they feel, and what they do. They're all disagreeing with each other, basically, and this creates chaos, confusion, and negative emotions, right? So you have to get all your shit straight and get it all in alignment, and then, obviously that's not easy to do, but that is the goal that's going to create basically a conscious, intentional human being that can actually create, because it's not just about discerning truth from reality. It's, again, that choice part. That's your creative power. That's your magic. And so your magic is going to be trash if your thoughts and emotions are all disjointed, then your actions will be out of alignment, and that's what you're creating, because action is the really the determining factor that that decides like what you're actually creating in your experience. So, like I said, it's a feedback loop, because it starts in the mind, that determines what you care about, and then therefore what you take action on. But then, as I said before, those actions create an outcome in reality, which then tells you, are you doing the right action or the wrong action? So somebody that's tired of being poor and so frustrated and this and that, but yet they're not saving money, they're not trying to build businesses or do side hustles or anything like that, they're just going to work every single day running on the hamster wheel, then how can you complain about your situation when you aren't taking any action to change it? So that's really what it comes down to, is all of those things will culminate at the action level, and that's, you know, really what's deciding what you really care about and what you truly know. So
I have to credit you, darling. That's one of the best analysis or descriptions or synthesis that I've heard, right? I'm really impressed because it's you've kind of boiled it down into a very clear and understandable process, which is well done.
Well, thank you.
Well done.
It's not easy.
Very, very impressed.
It's I mean, you could do just hours and hours of a presentation on this and just scratch the surface. So
Well, because I always think of like ad hominem attack, for example. You know what I mean? And like the tools that you can use within it. But even when you just said like logic, rhetoric, and grammar, again, those are words that just like even I utilize the trivium, and I'm always down. Am I doing the grammar or the logic right? You know what I mean? Like those words have no meaning to me, even though the entire process does, right? And I find that aspect of it to be an incredibly powerful tool because you can look at the news and you can see where the lies are, right? But we won't go there for a second. I want to stay where you're talking about. That's incredibly powerful. And the things that come to mind for me when I hear that are, A, this is an amazing tool for people, amazing. But I have several questions because the first thing that I want to address is that I know people who don't have a mechanism to do that first step, right? They don't have the ability to consciously choose how they feel about a real situation, right? So if it's raining, they're going to be miserable. And even when I talk to them, I say, hey, look, just imagine, you know, that you love rain and you want to go out dancing in the rain and it's all really fun and crazy to get all wet. And it's like they can't make that the first step. They don't know how to do that. So do you have any tools to help people do step one in this process, which is understand that it's your choice how to feel about a real event?
It's a tough one because there's a lot of layers to it. The biggest determining factor is simply how much psychological and emotional damage has a person sustained in their life and how much work have they done to heal that. Because when we get into, you know, kind of, you're asking about the Trivium from the context of my presentation, Trivium Hacking, which is a 4-hour master blueprint to mind control, essentially. And that is the core concept. That's why it's called Trivium Hacking. Because, A, people are not even taught the Trivium. In fact, you know, there's a story about Caesar. He caught one of his kind of military leaders teaching a slave the Trivium, and he was like, if all the slaves knew this, we wouldn't have slaves anymore, so don't ever let me catch you doing that again, or I'll put you out in the desert.
And therein lies the rub, doesn't it, darling?
Exactly.
I mean, that is literally the key. Okay, like even in these, you know, those highfalutin schools of the controller children, I'm sure they teach it, right? It's just for us, the ones that are supposed to be the good
Right.
slaves, we don't get to have the benefit of this education. And that's why I was saying this is such an important thing for people to understand, because this is the key to, like, what, in your words, freedom, right? It's the breaking out of the mind
Mm-hmm.
control and the mechanism by which you can free your
Hmm.
mind. I didn't know that about Caesar and the slave, but I mean that's literally like in my documentary we just talked about how in the Romans took the magical papyri out of the Egyptian temples, right? So like way back then was the destruction of magic. Way back then, it's right. They were onto these mechanisms that allow us our own freedom, right? And they stamped them out way back then. It's just crazy to me. Crazy.
Right. And that's telling you that's what this whole natural law thing is all about. Is it's timeless. As I said in the very beginning when I'm defining it, is this is nothing new. It's as old as time itself, and human beings have known about this, but that is the biggest area for the power struggle, because it is a war of the mind. That's what spiritual warfare is, and mind control. It's what it is all about. So back to this Trivium hacking concept, is that they don't want the slaves knowing this system that is the absolute key to their creative power. Because you mentioned freedom. Freedom is a condition that must be created. It's not something that just comes out of thin air, right? It is something that is created. How do you create something? Through choices, through actions. And freedom is 100% correlated to morality, especially when you get to the collective aggregate level. As the morality of a civilization declines, freedom invariably declines. And it works the opposite way as well. So ask yourself, those watching, is morality in decline or incline right now? And is freedom in incline or decline? I think it's pretty obvious what the answer to that is.
That was one of the biggest things I got from Mark, right? That idea. And then kind of, well, the morality freedom index, if you want to call it that, right? And then the extension by that of the natural energy or free energy, right? He kind of takes it in that direction as well. But the correlation between freedom and morality is like when you even hear that, you're like exhausted, right? Because it's like, and COVID as an example of what people are willing to do to their neighbors, what it showed us in like the most uh, visceral way, the average morality of the average human being at the supermarket, right? Like the lengths that we were willing, and we all like to think, oh, if I was in Nazi Germany, I would have been very different. And no, because we've just basically been through the same decision making process, right? The same, you at a fundamental level as a human being had to make the same decisions that the Nazi German had to make in those days. And nah, you failed, right? And so it's no and so it's no surprise that we're living in this ever encroaching digital fucking prison that's going to be of a prison of greater magnitude than we can even possibly imagine. And we're doing it to ourselves. But morality is something that is, again, a concept that is alien to people. Like, again, if I feel like I need to feed my family, so if I steal from yours, I don't care, right? So this goes back. I wanted to, like, we had the first problem, which was people don't know how to change their mind, which I'm so glad you're doing friggin' hacking, darling. Like, that's amazing. Like, again, I'm so impressed. Like, wow, we need that. The second problem is, though, that once, even if you do that, and like you said, it's wrong, what happens when there's no fucks to give? Like how do we fix the situation when I know it's wrong and I don't have fucks to give, and I'm so have no fucks to give that I'm willing to put it on Facebook like I'm cool, right? Like how do we fix that problem?
Well, it's not an easy one, but and people don't like the answer. You know, it's like sure the question begs itself, but then when you tell people the answer, they're just like, yeah, get out of here. It really is as simple as I think it's a combination of two things. You have to have education because people just are not exposed to the fundamental objective principles taught in such a way, such as the concept of voluntarism or anarchy. You know, that's a scary word for people because they only have been conditioned to think
They
of
don't
it as
understand.
that just means chaos, lawlessness, you know,
Yes.
mayhem. Um, and then the more important thing actually is natural law is always in effect. It doesn't matter whether it's being taught or not, it's cause and effect. So it is a bit of a pendulum thing because as a society descends into moral degradation and therefore deeper and deeper slavery, because those are you know, they go hand in hand, people feel that. And then and the
Yeah.
deeper
You're soon going to have fucks to give when you're a slave. When you're an
that's
actual
it.
slave, all of a sudden
As
you're going to have some
unfortunate
fucks.
as
Yeah.
that is, most people will not care until it's them that start to feel that heat of the fire that they're stoking, you know, relentlessly. And then suddenly, oh, well, when it affects me, now I have a few fucks that I just conjured up, you know, to give. And it may have to come to that.
The thing, I think the key aspect is something else that I always talk about on my podcast is that we've been tricked into this Occam's razor thing, right? The straight line, the easiest answer, the simple answer. And that is a really big lie because things are complicated and people just don't have the education. I'm going to go back to Elon Musk. Elon Musk and probably very few scientists on the planet actually understand the ramifications of what they're doing, right? They, from a physical, scientific perspective, they have no idea how this is going to play out. They don't have the education, they don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the case study because it's never happened before. And they're lacking the wisdom to know if I don't know anything about this, maybe I should proceed slowly and see what happens. But they go full steam ahead, right? So without the fundamental education on a particular subject, we just make up this kind of simple excuse in our head, and that's how it works. And so everything's going to be okay. Like they don't understand that if I do steal from my neighbor, I'm going to end up, or my children are going to end up as slaves, right? That there's a disconnection between those ideas. The education, like you said, is missing. And so it's easier in the moment to not give fucks because the idea of a future slavery doesn't even occur to them, right? That correlation doesn't exist. And so I think you've nailed it there in terms of education. I think you're right, darling. I think you're right.
The key is, you know, most people on its face understand conceptually right from wrong, but then all of a sudden the programming trick, you know, kicks in and it's like, well, of course it's wrong to steal, but, and there's the exception, well, or when the government does it and we call it taxation, well, then that's different somehow because we come up with a fancy super official word and we've got all these bureaucrats doing all these super legitimate, you know, kind of rituals.
And police with guns or IRS with guns, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm
Force.
getting at is universal means universal. It doesn't mean what's wrong for the slaves is okay for the ruling class. That's different. They have their own set of laws and own set of rules that they follow. No, that's not how any of it works. Everybody is just human beings. So even this concept that, oh, well, human beings are too vile and to be trusted with freedom, then how in the world can they be trusted with government power? it's a self-defeating argument, right? It's much better to at least let people just be responsible for themselves and how they live their own lives than giving these people such power of any kind when it comes to it's backed by violence, right? I mean, there's different forms of power, but what we're talking about here is when you're forcing someone through violence, that makes it immoral, right? You can lead someone, you can try to inspire them or just be a voice of reason to help influence their decisions. There's nothing wrong with that. But as soon as you say, well, I'm the government now, I just decided, or everybody on the block here, we all got together and decided I'm going to be the government, and now I can steal from you, but we call it taxes, but I promise I'll spend it on some good things that may or may not like actually help you. And I can write laws now, so I can govern you. I can tell you, and if you break these laws, then I can further extort you, kidnap you, put you in a cage, and kill you if you resist. Like, this is the insanity that people believe on a mass scale. That tells you everything you need to know about how effective mind control is. So it all ties together with this trivium concept, because it is the crux of the knowledge, but the choices and where those come together in that creative capacity. So just to tie that together from earlier about what trivium hacking means is you don't own your own creative power as a slave because someone else has hijacked or hacked into. That's what hacking is you're kind of surreptitiously entering a system with the intent to take it over, to usurp that. And what is it they're usurping? Your creative power, because you are a sovereign divine being. That's why the whole system is so geared towards this one thing of hacking your creative ability through each layer, the mental level. They're pouring sewage into your brain 24/7 through media, absolute lies, manipulation, gaslighting, the whole 9 yards there at the mental level. Then they're manipulating you at the emotional level, what you care about, and instilling fear in you because it's more coercion, right? The whole system relies on immoral behavior. So they have to degrade people's conception of morality so they are demoralized, because a demoralized human is not going to stand in their power. They're either going to accept and even praise tyranny and oppression on them because they're a willing slave, or become an oppressor themselves by becoming a bureaucrat, a police officer, a politician, something like that, where, well, if we're all slaves, at least I'll be in the pyramid of power and I'll have some people that I can rule over. That's the mindset, right? So it's the mental level, the emotional level, and the action level as well, because you're given false choices, right? So it's like, even if you are trying to do the right thing, but you're giving this Hegelian dialectic of like, well, here's what we can do, when the actual real choice is this over here, or 100 other ones that they're not telling you. It's just these are the two that they want, and then it's all fabricated and then offered to you. It's like, oh, well, but you're getting to choose, so you have autonomy, so you're not a slave, of course, right? Here's your red pill or blue pill kind of thing.
This is the thing. It's so frustrating when I see, these really impassioned fights on the internet between people I love about Orange Man or a Sleepy Man, right? And it's like, dude, there's another choice, right? There's actually another. You don't have to fight between Orange Man and Sleepy Man. There is another choice. You just don't know what it is. You haven't been told about
That's where
it,
the
right? Because
education comes
either
in.
Orange Man or Sleepy Man, they're happy with, right? But there are other choices, and that is really the Hegelian dialectic is a thing that other people. Again, it's like, when you're talking about the surge in your mind, I mean, it's it is overwhelming, right? The degree to which they have developed. I wrote a blog post. I haven't posted it yet, but the point was, if you brought a person from the 1920s, right, 100 years ago, and if you stripped away the internet, the mobile phones, the kind of the internet infrastructure, the communication control grid stuff, right? How different would it really seem to somebody in the 1920s? They had airplanes, they had electric lights, right? The biggest advances in our technology have been aligned with this mind control manipulation tools, right? That's where we've got the algorithms and we've got the video phones and we've got the streaming video and we've got the 3D. It's like all of our collective intelligence has gone into creating the ultimate mind fuck machine, right? And, flying cars, health technology, it's like we've focused on this one thing and we're so good at it. And now with AI that is creating essentially a doppelganger of us, like the AI apparently is supposed to know us better than we know us and is able to manipulate our minds better than ever. It's more important, I think, than ever that this kind of technology, this framework that you're giving people gets out there. Because I'll tell you one thing that is really true, okay? One thing that people might not realize about how powerful this is literal magic. And what I mean by literal magic is that once you see what's going on, for example, I'm going to go back to ad hominem attack. I can't even say it, right? Once you understand that mechanism, you're never going to be fooled by it again, right? You're never going to be fooled because you have a name for the trick that they're playing on you and you can see it and it doesn't work anymore, right? And that's why this stuff is why they don't want you to know, is because their magic becomes completely disempowered once you operate the way that you're teaching people how to operate, right? So it is literally the ultimate get out of jail free.
Right. The magician doesn't want to give away their tricks because then it won't have the same ooh, shock and awe effect. You know what I mean? That really is it. And so that's exactly what I was setting out to do when I made my Trivium hacking presentation is yes, I can't take, so long to explain every little detail about every little thing, but I just wanted to touch on everything that I felt was a piece in the machine and how it works at a basic level. So like you said, you have a name for it now. You're like, oh, this is a thing. And then you can recognize it when it's happening in the future. And you could take that and just study way deeper on it. But just trying to give you those little breadcrumbs to put all the pieces together. That I wasn't trying to say everything about everything. I was trying to include every little vital piece to understanding how it all works as a extremely sophisticated system of hijacking people's humanity and sovereignty and most important, their magic.
Yeah. Look, honestly, we need that. We need the fundamentals, right? We can get off onto all these crazy Latin words, okay? Mm-hmm. But we're never going to get there if we don't just break out of the prison first. So it's like you're giving us the jailbreak, right? Which is awesome. The key to the castle. And we'll get into magic in a minute, but I just want to say in Heka, I have a quote from Mark Passio, and it just was something that gave me absolute goose pimples. And it was like, all you have to do is get people to believe what's not true and not believe what is true. Mm-hmm. And you wholly own them.
Absolutely.
Right? And if that's not kind of the definition of what we're seeing today, I don't know what is, right? I don't know what is. But I put that in to Heka because Heka is a show about magic. So let's go there, darling. Tell me your take on this whole natural law magic connection.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned early on about my approach to everything is to be as holistic as possible, not getting too focused in on one thing, but the greater whole. And so for me, that is kind of the definition of the probably the biggest framework that I operate from, which is animism, where, you know, natural law fits into that framework. It's a part of it. At a certain point, natural law was my biggest framework, but then as I started expanding, I saw that animism is a bigger system that incorporates natural law into it. And so maybe there's a bigger thing as well, but I think I'm getting really close to the bullseye, because it's not, much further that you can go with that, because animism is basically the understanding of that first Hermetic principle of mentalism, that everything is consciousness, everything, it has the divine spark within it, and everything is nature, because it is, right? And again, I like to use nature and reality interchangeably. So when you were just saying, getting people to believe what isn't true and to reject what is true, that is a war on reality itself. That is what spiritual warfare is. And if you interchange the words like I do, it's a war on nature. Because the animist mindset is understanding that nature is you and you are nature. They're not these two separate things. It's all part of one system. And natural law is that glue that holds it all together, because everything has a cause and effect, but it's a feedback loop, because every effect has a cause, and every so it's playing into it, just like the Trivium. You take an action that gives you feedback that then feeds back into your mental frameworks and what you care about, and so on. So that's a perfect example of, you have to understand everything is it's a circuit, right? Nature is a circle. The Ouroboros, Mother Earth, all, that's the animistic or the pagan mindset. We talk a lot about paganism. I define paganism as practical animism, or just animism applied, because animism is the mindset, paganism is the tradition, the ritualized application of that knowing of you are nature and nature is you, and you're all part of the greater whole. And so again, the morality plays very strongly into that, because the analogy that I love to use, because it's not only funny but very accurate when it comes to this concept of morality and this law of freedom that we talked about, is it's like pissing in the swimming pool. Like, it's like you're still swimming in it. You might think you can go over to this corner over here and be insulated from it, but if it, and it's now think like, what if everyone in that pool is thinking the same way as you? Then the water turns yellow, and you're all just swimming in it, thinking, well, I'm insulated from my actions. Like, doesn't affect me. I'll just do whatever. If it's good for me, then it's good. And that's how a lot of people think. But you're basically it's like moral pollution, basically, is another way to put that. You're putting that into the world, right? When you steal from someone, or you hurt someone or lie to them, you're literally saying, this is the world that I want to live in, where people steal, cheat, and lie, because I'm literally doing that. That is the world that you're creating through those actions. And then you have to apply that collectively. So if everyone's thinking like that, it's like, oh, well, what's one candy wrapper? What's one candy wrapper? What's one candy wrapper? And soon there's just trash everywhere, because, well, I mean, one person can't pollute the whole planet. Well, no, but everybody thinking that way can. And it'll happen a lot quicker than you think. So that's really it. It is just understanding your actions have a bigger role than you think, not only in the world that you are objectively creating. That's why you have to get that subjective aspect out of the way. There are subjective elements to morality, and I acknowledge those, but those are the less important aspects, like what diet you want to eat, or whether you think polyamory is okay, right? Those are more like personal choices. But if it's all consensual and not causing, undue harm to someone else's property or themselves, then it's not objectively immoral. So if we could just get on the same page about the objective moral or immoral actions, because there's only 7 wrongs and everything else is a right, meaning a right, an action that you have the right to take. So it basically comes down to property rights, right? That's the only kind of rights there are. And it's a very simple but true way to look at it, because you own yourself, right? So if you own yourself, then you have the right to take actions as long as it's not infringing on the rights of another person or their property, because that's their property rights of themselves as a self-owning, self-sovereign being and their stuff, right? So it's like as simple as it gets. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. And yet people can't get that. It's almost too simple, or they always have these ways to outthink it and be like, well, it's, well, but if there's a virus going around, all of a sudden that just goes right out the window. And it's like, you've learned nothing. You don't get it. You know what I mean?
No, I'm just saying it's crazy when you bring it down to those 2 things that you just said.
Don't hurt people
Hurt
and don't take
another
their
person
stuff.
and don't hurt their property. Yeah. Like, how could it get any simpler than that, dude? Like, when you're saying animism, one of the things that I love about animism is the idea of being in right relation, okay? So it's basically treat nature the way you want to be treated, right? Like, goes back to the Bible.
Because you are nature. You're treating yourself. It's the feedback loop. It's the understanding that that's how reality actually operates. That is it. That's the nail on the head right there.
We've been snowed, like so snowed. Like, even one of the things, and it really is a very big problem in the West, right? When I would go to a supermarket in the West and go and do a checkout or whatever, and I'd smile at the person, you wouldn't even get a smile back, right? Like, the smallest little acts of kindness, and this is not everyone, but I'm just saying as a generalization, in Asia, you smile, you get a 10 times bigger smile back, right? Like, the gift of how you want to be treated. If you treat somebody the way you want to be treated, it's a real return on investment in Asia rather than in the Western cultures, right? And I think there's a lot that has happened through education. I think a lot has happened structurally to put people into poverty. Like, when you're at that, that hierarchy of needs thing and you're at survival level, a lot of this shit goes out the window. But the mistake is that if you kept it in, you wouldn't be in the situation that you are, right? Like, it's anti-intuitive in some respects. And I think that's, that might be the interconnectedness of the system, right? The feedback loop that you're talking about. I think that the grokking that it really is interconnected is part of the education that's missing, right? Because when I drop my candy wrapper, I don't grok that it's part of a bigger problem that's creating.
There's a disconnect, and what I think is ultimately a dissociative disorder, which kind of ties into the they-them thing that you brought up earlier. It is there's a lot of that. It's a schism of the mind, a fracturization. This is what trauma does. So everything about the whole slave control system is about perpetuating as much trauma and chaos and suffering as possible, because it keeps people in that survival mindset, which causes them to throw their morals out the window and opens the door for more tyranny, because people are like, oh, things are getting so bad. We need even more government and more control because we have to try to keep a grasp on this whole thing that's flying apart, when it's just like the cart before the horse, man. You've got to put the morality first, and that's the only thing that can actually heal ourselves and our relationships and then the world. and it works in that order. It's like the fractal, the layers, right? Yeah, man, it's so much to get into.
But hey, the good news is that we'll be in the slave prison soon enough, and then we'll have fucks, and then we'll change, right? Like you said, it's a pendulum, it's a pendulum, and
It's definitely possible.
those of us who get it really don't want it to have to go there, right? Like,
It doesn't have to.
it doesn't have to go there. It doesn't have
It's
to.
like you can know that fire's hot, and then there's people that are so hard-headed you can tell them that, and they're just like, YOLO, and then they're like, oh, that's hot. No shit. You know, that's humans though. We can be hard-headed, and I mean,
Gotta love the humans.
it's like
You know, like
employing
animals.
two different types of intelligence. One is like, well, yeah, I felt that and it was hot, and now my brain has that direct experience, and sometimes that's what we need. But that's also another kind of indication of the mindset that someone is in, because you can explain something is hot and they can understand that rationally to where they know better without having to feel that heat themselves, because it actually makes sense that fire's hot and you probably shouldn't touch it, and then you don't need to have that direct experience because you understand it from sort of the philosophical level. And that's kind of an indication of the greater mindset that we're dealing with in terms of like a slave mind versus the mind of a magician. A slave is reactive, right? It's like, oh, well, when things get bad enough, then I'll change, right? Or reacting to how other people treat me. Well, everybody else would, stab me in the back in a heartbeat, so why shouldn't I? They're reacting to the current condition rather than the magician, who is proactive rather than reactive. He is at the cause, not the effect, because that's what magic is. Causality, creation. And then you're putting that into the world like planting a seed and watering it and cultivating that through culture. You're creating a culture of morality and care and humanity rather than verbatim Satanism, which is the me, I mindset. Dog eat dog, kill them before they kill me kind of a thing.
And by that definition, you can be a Christian and satanic, no problem,
Absolutely.
right? If it's again, it's another kind of confusion of the words. In fact, some of the biggest Christians I've met are entirely satanic in their operation, right? So it's it's a mess, darling. It's a big mess, isn't it? One of the other things I wanted to touch on in terms of magic as well, Shauna Home, who is one of the best manifestors, if you want to call it that, or magic women I've ever met. Like what she has accomplished in her life with no logical process. What she says is one of the most important things is get your mind right. Get your mind right. And her story is so funny about that. But the point is that when you were talking about that alignment thing, right? The thinking to the feeling to the actions, that whole thing, to be a potent magician, you need to, as you said earlier, have all of that in alignment. And it starts with getting the mind right in the first place, right? So, the discernment, the having the veil lifted so you can see this is a lie, this is a truth with a big T, this is observable reality. It goes back to that trivium hacking thing that you're talking about, because otherwise you're kind of like this, hose just going off in any direction because everything is not aligned in like a magic wand. A magic wand is a straight line that goes in one direction, right? If you don't have your system lined up, you've got leaks and you got water coming out of everywhere, and that's why the hose goes round and around and around, right? So that trivium hacking process that you're talking about, I imagine would lead people to being a lot more effective in the world in terms of their creations.
That is it. That is really what it comes down to. And this is why I start all of my videos with this is the Wizard Factory, giving you the spiritual tools and mindsets to live a more free and empowered life. Because like you just said, you have to get your mindset right. And that really means a framework of your worldview, right? Because that's the filter that every piece of information that's coming in has to pass through that filter and to be processed. So another way to talk about the trivium is knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, which is, so it's the information, and then it's the processing of that information. So you have to run it through the filters of your worldview. So if you're operating on a worldview that the government is good, the government cares about me, the government is always the right solution to any problem, force, violence, and coercion, then that's a false paradigm that you're operating on, and therefore there's going to be a disconnect between your beliefs and the reality that you're experiencing. So someone operating on that condition, they might go and vote, right? Because the mind, the care, and then the action, they're going to go vote because they're operating in that worldview that this is how you create change and do good things in the world. You go and vote, and then that politician gets elected. They fuck you over just like all the others will. And then what's going to happen? Your mind is saying, well, but I voted and they seemed so good. But your emotions are like, I'm frustrated because the outcome wasn't correct and they were just another charlatan. Well, because your mindset was out of alignment with reality. So my channel is all about dialing in on those mindsets as the prima principles, right? The first things first. That's what principle means. It must come first. And so anarchism, which is really just you own yourself and you're not a slave and no one has the right to force you to do anything because they don't, and to say they do is a claim of ownership on you, which is literal slavery. That's that one. Boom. Then
I know, it's like,
and then animism and natural law, right? Understanding that, men can say that they're creating laws, but they're just fictions, right? The only legitimate laws are the laws that are already built into nature. So, right,
system.
It's like, do you need a legal system or a moral system, man-made, when there's already one in place that says when you do, let's just say, fuck around and find out, or play stupid games, win stupid prizes. These are well-known tropes that are pointing directly to natural law and moral law, right? And if people are insulated from those consequences because of man-made institutions, then they aren't actually learning those lessons. Because the government's just going to come in and do all your work for you, or, make their decision. And
dude, how about in the States right now? It's something like if you walk into a supermarket and steal under what, like $3,000, it's not a crime. Like that is like the most. That's fundamentally.
Well, they could legalize murder. They could legalize murder if they wanted to, right? The government can. I mean, if the people vote and there's a consensus. That's really all the government does. It's a bunch of people agreeing on a fantasy, and then you could legalize, rape or murder or whatever, but that wouldn't change whether those things are right or wrong, right? Everything that the Third Reich did was legal, and that's what they're doing here now. They're creating all these more like surveillance and vaccine passports or whatever, like. That's all this is just man's insanity thinking that he's God and he can dictate right from wrong by scribbling on a piece of paper and stamping it and, the whole ritual around that.
Well, all I can say, darling, is you're doing God's work. So, listeners, you get on to what this young man's selling. Tell us your website, sweetie.
thewizardfactory.com right there.
Okay, and the Trivium hacking's on there, yes?
Yes, there's a tab for all my presentations, and those are embedded on there. But really just, I recommend, the YouTube channel is my primary focus, and there is a playlist called Laying the Foundation, and that is going to give you the most, it's going to give you those mindsets that you can install a proper operating system into your mind. And then once you have that, everything makes so much more sense. And all the madness that we're seeing played out, it's only duping people because they don't have those proper mental frameworks that they're operating from. So they just keep falling for it over and over and over again. But once you get that in hand, and again, this doesn't mean that you have like you're going to know everything and see through everything and have the right answer on everything. It's just about cutting through the bullshit and actually being able to make sense of what you're seeing and make better decisions based on that. Stop supporting institutions of slavery or people or belief systems that don't actually honor the human being.
I'll go back to what you said in the beginning. Freedom is something that's created. And
it's a condition.
It's a condition. And my gosh, in my lifetime, I have gone from probably blissful, ignorant freedom to a reality where it doesn't exist. And I can tell you that lack of freedom is probably the worst thing that can happen to you. And so we have to get onto it, people. We have to get onto it. We have to get our minds right. Yeah.
Slavery is the destruction of the human soul, 100%. If until we get out of collective slavery on this planet, everything else is going to suffer because we don't have true evolution happening. Everything is stunted. It's like saying a sheep is evolving while he's in a cage all day and being sheared,
Good analogy.
So, I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard people say things like freedom doesn't exist, it's a utopian pipe dream, this and that, and they're just not understanding that it is a condition of the right actions, right? You can't say you want a cake and then you don't go and get butter and flour and sugar and start making that cake. There are conditions that have to be met for baking a cake and creating freedom. That is natural law right there. It's like you have to take the actions to get the outcome. It doesn't just come for free. That's why it has to come with the responsibility, because that's what free will is. You can't be free without the responsibility of the choices that you're going to take or how you're going to use that free will. They have to go hand in hand. And that's the thing that people are avoiding more than anything. It's so much easier to delegate that freedom, vote for someone or, oh, Jesus, take the wheel. I'm not in control. It's all a cop out, as in I was just following orders. You know what I mean? It's all that's the name of the game, is trying to squirm your way out of being responsible for what you are creating. No, not the person behind you, not over you. And that goes for each and every one of us, including myself. That's not me up on a soapbox. That's just me sharing that load.
I have to make decisions every day. It's like, like when you go to the supermarket, right? Do you buy the ketchup by the BlackRock owned multi-glomerate, right? Or, you know what I mean? Like every little decision.
Every single choice matters. And it plays into the whole, the picture of what we're creating. So, yeah, it's not impossible, as unlikely as it might seem. If it can be,
we just have to choose to do it.
It's a choice away.
I love that, darling.
You have to change the mindset behind that, though, right? You can't make a choice you didn't know you had, or didn't think you had the power or the strength or the courage to take, right? Those are all things that have to be there. So it's not just as simple as, oh, you just make the choice, because what is fabricating every single choice is that trivium aspect of what you know, what you care about, And do you have the willpower and the courage to actually act on those things in alignment? And you
Yes.
can't get those things in order without healing. So this would be the thing to leave everyone with listening. There's a lot of lip service when it comes to healing, and yeah, I do the shadow work and I did the ayahuasca and this and that. But to me, like, you have to really go deep, because if you aren't shifting your beliefs about yourself and the world, then you aren't actually healing. Because I see people that have some of the right ideas, but they're still acting from their unconscious projections and being the victim and blaming this and blaming that instead of taking personal responsibility. And those are just symptoms of a wounded ego, for lack of a better word. I'm not someone that demonizes the ego. That's a really unhealthy and fallacious approach. It's not spiritual, because all your ego is it's your sense of who you are, right? It's your own self-concept. So if you don't want an ego, if you want to, like, why even incarnate to begin with? Like, what's the point of even being a you if you're going to come here and just be like, oh, there is no me, I'm just a fart wisping in the winds of the universe? It's like, that defeats the whole purpose. So it's not wrong to exist. It's not wrong to be Logan or Venice and be like, these are my likes, these are my dislikes, these are my strengths and weaknesses, these are my personality traits. And that's beautiful, because there's only one of you, and you can bring your own unique gifts to the world. But not when we're acting out of unconscious pain and suffering and either directing that inwards to ourselves. That's the demoralization. I'm just a slave. I don't deserve freedom, so therefore no one else should either. Projection. Or, trying to dominate other people because it's just compensating for a uncalibrated sense of self. Is that I'm not a master and I'm not a slave. And I don't identify as either of those. I don't want to lord over people, and I don't want people lording over me. I just own myself, and that's what I have power over: my property, my kingdom, my domain. And I'm not trying to invade anyone else's territory and encroach on them. I want them to live their own life and make good choices that respects themselves and respects me. And that's it. But all the issues with that simple dynamic is coming out of unhealed trauma that is allowing these mind control programs, these false beliefs about the world and how it works, and ourselves, who we really are, versus a false grafted concept of ourselves.
Frankenstein personality.
Yes. And just healing those and finding the balance between, the world isn't good or evil, it's what we make it. I'm not good or evil, it's about my choices. What am I doing with my body? And, and bringing those things together and just, understanding and living in sovereignty. That's morality right there.
Wow. I love it, darling. Healing. Okay. That's a big one. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one. But I see very much your point that if your beliefs and your internal perceptions are messed, straightening out this whole situation is a lot harder. Well, I want to thank you, darling. This has been really wonderful. And I think that you've given us so much value and so much to think about. So
Thank you.
Please, out there in the audience, check out this young man's YouTube channel. I want to thank you so much for your time, and what a great conversation, Logan. So thank you so much, darling.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Venice. I'm happy to do more content in the future anytime. And yes, if anyone got value out of this, be sure to check me out. And I've got a lot of stuff out there already. So, and more coming in the future.
Yes, let's get you on again, darling. I think it would be fantastic. So more soon. Okay.